Karen Brooks thought she was untouchable. "Remove the panels or face fines," she ordered Jack. But she had no idea that he would uncover a secret that would destroy her power. And when the truth came out, the consequences were devastating. But let's start from the beginning. Jack Thompson had always dreamed of a home that would allow him to live sustainably and independently. As soon as he moved to a small suburb in Arizona, the first thing he did was install solar panels. Not only did they help him save on electricity bills, but they also made his home self-sufficient. Mornings in his new house began with the invigorating aroma of freshly brewed coffee, soft sunlight streaming through the curtains, and a feeling of freedom. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. His joy didn't last long. A week later, he found an envelope with the official HOA logo in his mailbox. Inside was a letter from the president, Karen Brooks. As Jack read the lines, his sense of peace gradually turned to irritation. Black and white, it stated. The solar panels violated the community's aesthetic standard and had to be removed immediately. Otherwise, he would face fines. "What kind of nonsense is this?" Jack muttered, rereading the letter over and over, trying to grasp the absurdity of the claim. The panels were on the roof, barely visible from the street. Moreover, Jack knew that his state had laws protecting citizens' rights to use renewable energy sources. He sat down at his computer and started researching the legal side of the issue. Soon, he found out that the HOA had no right to prohibit solar panel installation unless it posed a safety hazard. Jack quickly drafted an official response, attached excerpts from the legislation, and sent the letter back. Deep down, he hoped this was just a misunderstanding that could be resolved peacefully. But the HOA's response was even harsher. "You have 14 days to remove them, or we will take you to court," the new letter stated. Jack sighed, shook his head, and placed the paper on the table. Now it was personal. A sense of injustice flared up inside him. Didn't he have the right to manage his own property? Could someone really force him to give up something that improved his life? He felt indignation rising in his chest, but along with it came determination. If they thought they could crush him with fines and bureaucracy, they were gravely mistaken. Jack had no intention of backing down. He was a man who believed in justice and wasn't about to let anyone dictate how he should live. But Karen was not the kind of person to retreat easily. As if on cue, a real siege began. HOA representatives started appearing near his house regularly, holding tablets and cameras. They meticulously documented every detail: the facade, the yard, the roof, the windows. It seemed like they were desperately searching for anything to use against him. A few days later, he found a fine notice in his mailbox. The reason? Failure to maintain lawn standards. Jack frowned as he reread the letter. The lawn, he had just mowed it yesterday. But this was just the beginning. A few days later, a new fine arrived, this time for illegal trash storage. Jack stepped onto his porch and looked around at his perfectly clean property. What trash? There was none. "They're trying to intimidate me," he muttered, clutching the latest letter in his hands. His suspicions were confirmed the next day. That morning, as he stepped outside, he found 2 of his tires slashed. His neighbor, Tom Baker, walked over and just shook his head. "They did the same thing to me," Tom said. "I wanted to install solar panels too, but Karen threatened me with fines and lawsuits. In the end, I just gave up." That was the turning point. Jack realized that if he backed down, his story would just be another example of how the HOA suppressed homeowners. He decided to fight. He began recording conversations with HOA representatives, photographing every so-called violation, and collecting letters and fines. He consulted a lawyer who confirmed his suspicions. The HOA was indeed overstepping its authority. And then Jack discovered something even more important. Karen had signed a lucrative contract with an energy company. This company was paying her to prevent alternative energy sources from being installed in the neighborhood. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't just about bureaucracy or aesthetic standards. This was about money. Now, it wasn't just a fight for solar panels, it was a battle against corruption, and Jack was ready to go all the way. Jack knew it was time to act. He wasn't the type to accept injustice. If someone tried to pressure him illegally, he would fight back, within the law. He filed a $50,000 lawsuit against the HOA for emotional distress, illegal harassment, and violating his rights. This wasn't just a response, it was a direct challenge to a system that had gone unchecked for too long. But this was just the beginning. Jack started talking to his neighbors, asking if they had experienced similar issues. Their answers shocked him. Many were also unhappy with Karen but were too afraid to take action. People shared stories of unexpected fines, constant pressure, and how Karen had ruled the neighborhood for years without giving residents any say in decisions. They had remained silent out of fear of losing more than they could gain. Everything changed when Jack organized a homeowners meeting. He understood that by uniting they could bring real change. During the meeting, an elderly resident, Mrs. Watson, spoke up. "I have something to show you," she said, pulling a stack of old documents from a worn-out folder. "These are the HOA's financial records from the past few years." Jack took the papers and studied them carefully. The more he read, the more his anger turned into shock. Karen had been using HOA funds for personal expenses. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was outright corruption. The documents clearly showed. HOA funds were spent on luxury trips, expensive restaurant dinners, and renovations to Karen's private home. Systematic, illegal fines were bringing her thousands of dollars every month. Money meant for community improvements was simply disappearing. "This is fraud," a neighbor exclaimed. "We've been paying all this time and she was just spending it on herself?" People began murmuring angrily. The fear that had gripped them for years started to fade. Jack now had a trump card. This wasn't just about solar panels anymore. This was about exposing the entire corrupt HOA scheme. And now he had enough evidence to take it all the way. News of the lawsuit spread like wildfire. Residents, journalists, and even those who had never cared about the HOA's activities started following Jack's case. Local media picked up the story, making it one of the most talked about issues in the area. Karen, however, wasn't giving up without a fight. She hired a lawyer and tried to paint Jack as a troublemaker who disrespected community rules. She spoke of the chaos he was creating and how his actions could disrupt the neighborhood's harmony. But her words rang hollow. Jack was ready. The courtroom was tense as the judge flipped through the documents. Karen tried to appear confident, but when Jack and his lawyer presented the evidence, everything changed. Fraudulent violation notices Karen had used against residents. Financial misconduct, funds meant for improvements were spent on her personal luxuries. Testimonies from neighbors who had endured her harassment for years. When the judge finally looked at Karen, the room fell silent. He set the papers down and declared, "The HOA is ordered to pay Jack Thompson $50,000 in damages. Furthermore, a financial audit will be conducted and the association's rules will be revised." Karen looked stunned. She tried to protest, but she knew it was over. Her schemes had come to light, and now they were under separate investigation. Her carefully built reputation was crumbling before her eyes. As Jack stepped out of the courthouse, he took a deep breath. This wasn't just a victory, it was proof that justice prevails. He had not only protected his solar panels, he had helped his entire community break free from a corrupt leader. From that day on, neighbors stood taller. They knew they could fight for their rights and win. And as Jack looked up at the sun powering his home, he smiled. He had won, and it was a victory for everyone who had ever faced injustice.